all sick. Wang had been going around telling other inmates that he'd been framed, that our whole community had turned against him because of his race. He was playing the victim to murderers and drug dealers, saying we'd made up the whole thing because we didn't like having an Asian cop in our neighborhood. Even the other criminals weren't buying his sob story, though. Blake's contact said one guy doing life for killing his wife told Wang to shut up, because at least he'd never put kids in danger. That same week, we gathered at Manuel's house and spread out a huge calendar across his dining room table. Stefan had gotten us copies of Wang's intake paperwork, and we marked every possible release date with red ink. The earliest he could get out was 9 months if he got good behavior credits, and completed the joke rehabilitation program they offered. Manuel pointed to different dates and explained how the parole board worked, how they met every month, but Wang's case wouldn't come up until at least month 7. Everyone took photos of the calendar on their phones, and we made a shared document, so any updates would go to all 25 members instantly. 3 days later, I was sitting in Cecilia's therapy appointment when the therapist pulled me aside after the session. She suggested we might want to think about moving to give Cecilia a fresh start somewhere new, where she wouldn't have all these reminders. I told her straight up that we weren't going anywhere because we didn't do anything wrong and I wasn't letting Wang drive us from our home. The therapist nodded, but I could tell she thought I was being stubborn. Stefan texted the group chat that night with news that made my skin crawl. Wang had put in a transfer request to a prison 3 states away, claiming he feared for his safety in our state. He wrote in his request that the local community had it out for him, and he needed protection. The request got denied 2 weeks later because that facility was already over capacity, and they weren't taking transfers. Manuel called an emergency meeting at his office downtown, where he could talk to us about legal stuff without worrying about being overheard. He explained that if Wang violated even the smallest parole condition like missing a check-in or going somewhere he wasn't supposed to, he'd go back to finish his full sentence. We spent the next 2 hours going through every single parole rule and talking about how we could legally document any violations we witnessed. Nobody was talking about doing anything illegal, but we all knew we'd be watching him like hawks. The parole hearing date came faster than I expected, and I showed up at the courthouse at 6 in the morning to make sure I got a seat. By the time the hearing started at 9:30, parents had packed into the small room and more were standing in the hallway. Wang walked in wearing a suit his sister must have brought him, and he kept his eyes on his shoes the whole time. His sister got up to speak first, and her voice shook as she told the board her brother was a good man who made one mistake. She kept glancing back at all of us sitting there and stumbling over her words. When it was my turn to testify, I brought a folder 3 inches thick with every receipt from Cecilia's therapy, every prescription for her anxiety medication, every note from her teacher about her struggles in the school since that night. I made sure the board understood that Wang didn't just mess up one night, but gave my daughter a life sentence of trauma. The board members kept writing notes but wouldn't make eye contact with me. Rania went next, and she completely broke down trying to describe how her daughter still checked the locks 5 times before bed and wouldn't go anywhere alone, even to the bathroom at the school. The board members shifted in their seats, and one of them actually checked his watch while she was crying. After 3 hours of testimony from parents, teachers, and even Cecilia's pediatrician who talked about the physical effects of trauma on children,